Only mode.
Welcome and good morning. My name is Charlie Garrier, and this morning we're going to be talking about easy integrations. I'm the sales engineer at Recurly, and we're going to be getting started in just a minute. All right, again, welcome to this morning's webinar on integrations and Recurly. This webinar is designed for a wide variety of audiences, people who have been playing around with Recurly and determined that it's a fit for their business and now need to go about the business of actually using Recurly to manage their subscription billing. So today we're going to discuss a number of integration options that are available to you, starting with the most simple and out-of-the-box methods. Those are known as the hosted pages. We'll move into talking about the Recurly JavaScript library, which allows you to keep your own kind of shopping cart and checkout flow on your website, but securely collect credit card information. We'll also discuss the use of Recurly's RESTful Web Service API, as well as our webhooks or push notifications. Finally, I'll leave you with some resources for some further reading, and also places to get your questions answered. And finally, we'll wrap up the last few minutes of the webinar with a brief question and answer session. So at any point during the webinar, you're welcome to input questions into the GoToWebinar box, and we'll devote a few minutes towards the end of the webinar to address those. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. And we'll do so by talking about the hosted payment pages. These are an out-of-the-box integration method that require no development or coding work on your part. Every time you create a plan in Recurly, that plan, which represents a service level or a product or some type of product or service that you're billing for on a recurring basis, every time you do that, a hosted payment page is automatically generated. These hosted payment pages, as their name suggests, are hosted by Recurly. They're on a Recurly.com domain, and they're very basic kind of sign up and credit card capture form. There, is some customization available for these. You can add your company's logo, you can change the background color, and you can tweak a few other small things. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of a hosted payment page in real life, so to speak. If I log into my Recurly test account for this webinar and view one of my plans, this is called Unlimited Monthly Visits. It's kind of an all-you-can-eat buffet type deal. You'll see that it has a corresponding hosted payment page. And I can copy and paste this URL, or I can hit View and automatically be directed to that page. How you use this URL is simply by editing a website, a web page that you host, and linking your customers to this hosted page. So the exact way you'll do this will depend on a number of things, like which content management system you use, which text editor you use. I'm going to use a program called Blue Griffin, which is a WYSIWYG HTML editor. And I'm simply going to edit my site here for this fictitious sushi restaurant, which is coincidentally located at Recurly's headquarters. And I'm going to link a certain text to my hosted page URL. I'll go ahead and save my changes. Now, if we imagine that I'm a potential customer of this sushi restaurant, when I visit that page, I will see the following text, and when I click here to subscribe, I'll be directed to the corresponding Recurly hosted payment page, where I'll be prompted for my payment information. I'll see which plan I'm signed up for. Because this site is a test site, I'll have a fake credit card number I can use. So we'll go ahead and fill this out. And now we'll go ahead and sign up on behalf of this customer, pretending that we are this customer. And I've neglected to put my email address in, so we'll go ahead and do that. And great, the customer will then see a confirmation message. The hosted payment pages actually have a number of other parameters that you can use to essentially pre-fill out that form on behalf of the customer. So if the customer says that they want a specific quantity, you can simply build the URL so that it pulls in that quantity. If you have a specific scheme that you want to use for the account code and username fields in Recurly, simply append the URL thus, and those will be reflected in the account that's actually created in Recurly. By default, the hosted payment pages from Recurly use the customer's email address as the account code in Recurly. The account code in Recurly is simply the unique identifier that each account must have. Finally, if the customer has already logged into your website or if you've already collected some information about them, you can pre-fill that form by appending these certain parameters to the URL as such. So we can quickly take a look at those as well. Here I've specified that the quantity should be 5, and if we scroll down we'll see that the quantity and the price have been updated to reflect that. I've also done an example where I've filled in the first name, last name, and email address in the URL, and it has pre-populated those fields for me. So for instance, I could change this to Charlie, and then Charlie will be automatically filled into the corresponding form fields. So those are, in essence, the hosted payment pages. Very easy to get up and running. No development work, no coding work, kind of out of the box. Every time you create a plan or a product or a service that you're going to charge for in Recurly, that particular plan will have a corresponding hosted payment pages. The hosted payment pages also have the added benefit of being automatically translated. So if your customer is visiting from a foreign country and has their browser, their Safari or Firefox or Google Chrome is set up to display pages in a certain language, like French, for instance. When the customer visits the hosted payment pages, they will automatically be translated to that customer's locale. And there's a full list of languages that the hosted payment pages support in our documentation, which I will provide you with towards the end of the webinar. Moving on, Recurly also has hosted account management pages. So as the name implies, again, these are hosted by Recurly, and they're used for kind of ongoing account maintenance and management. So once the customer has signed up, you can provide them with a link to a page that is unique to them, displaying their subscriptions, their subscription status, past invoices, and also the ability to update their particular billing information, so supply you with a new credit card or a new payment method. So if we were to go ahead and log into that Recurly test webinar site that we were playing around with before, we'll see that we have a new account that I just created today, August 26th, as part of this webinar. And this account has a unique hosted account management URL. If I highlight it here, you'll see that at the end it has this unique, what we call a hosted login token. This is unique to the customer. So I could email the customer this link. In fact, this link is included in Recurly's default emails to the customer, and they would be securely brought to a page that just shows their information. If I were to, for instance, change this hosted login attempt, if I was a malicious user, I'm trying to access someone else's account management portal, you'll see that just by altering it by even one digit will not work. Alternatively, you can enable the same functionality and allow your customers to sign up for a username and password on Recurly.com if you wanted to give them that option as well. But you can see the hosted account management pages display the account information, allow the customer to cancel their subscriptions, view their invoices. They can even download or print a PDF copy of those invoices. And the most important feature probably is the ability to update their billing information. So if the customer has to change their billing address or change their credit card number, you can supply them with a link to this hosted account management page for their account, and they will be able to do so. So I can go ahead and change this back to California, for instance, and submit that as a billing information update. The hosted account management pages are also nice to use because they don't require any coding work. They're enabled kind of by default. So if you wanted to simply allow your customers to be redirected from your website or your application to a Recurly hosted account management page where they could, for instance, update their billing information or change their subscription information, then these hosted account management pages are a good use case for that. Great. If the hosted payment pages or the hosted account management pages don't have the customization that you want, if you're a very brand conscious organization and you want more control over the look and feel of those pages, or they simply don't fit your use cases, Recurly has a JavaScript library that allows you to essentially host your own secure credit card capture forms. The great thing about Recurly.js is customers stay on your website or within your application, and the payment information that your customers submit is actually tokenized before it ever reaches your web servers. And this is very important for PCI compliance reasons. It's much easier and much better if your servers only see the credit card information in a tokenized form. So here are a few examples of customer websites that use Recurly JavaScript. You can see that each of these looks markedly different. So with Recurly JavaScript, you have full control over the HTML and the CSS, so you can style these pages any way you'd like. The way that Recurly JavaScript works is, if you can see right now, I'm showing the kind of final checkout page for each of these different Recurly customers, and it's at the point where the customer is ready to submit their credit card information to be billed. So what happens when a website uses Recurly JavaScript is that this sensitive billing information is actually sucked out of that payment capture form, and it's sent along with what's called your public key to Recurly for tokenization. Now, tokenization is a kind of payment industry term that refers to when credit card information is substituted by a randomly generated string of letters and numbers and punctuation marks. It bears no mathematical relationship to the payment information. It's completely random. So even if you were to submit the same card details for tokenization to Recurly over and over again, you see that each instance of that token would be different from the previous because it is randomly generated. So this is a graphic kind of representing that. If we imagine that purple box down in the lower left-hand corner is your website or your application where the customer is entering in their credit card number, their card security value, and their expiration date, potentially also their billing address, then that information is actually sucked out of that form and sent to Recurly. Recurly returns a token, and this is an example of a token. So you can see it's complete nonsense and gibberish, and it's randomly generated. So this token, even though it's a legit token, is something that I randomly generated probably weeks ago and is no longer valid. This token is then submitted directly from the customer's browser to your web server. So your web servers never see the credit card information that the customer entered. They never see the 16-digit credit card number. They never see the card security value. They never see the billing address. All that is kind of encapsulated in this token. Once your web servers receive this token, you'll actually resubmit it back to Recurly. You'll sign it with your private API key and submit it to Recurly as part of an API call, for instance, to create an account or to create a subscription. And you'll do that a number of ways depending on the technology stack that your website uses and that you're comfortable with. Recurly makes it very easy to integrate this functionality into your website. If you use Ruby, PHP, Python, or C#.net, we have officially supported client libraries for those particular web development languages. Third parties have also developed clients for Node.js and Java, and there are a handful of other languages like Go that third parties have essentially written client libraries for. The Recurly API is a RESTful web services API. It does XML request and response. So if you don't use any of these languages, or you wanted to write your own client library, or interact directly with the Recurly Web Services API, you can do that as well. Once Recurly receives the token, that's been signed with your private key, and the private key is simply, as its name implies, a unique code or value that only your company knows and is unique to your company. So if we receive that token that's signed with your private key, we compare it to the token that was previously generated with your public key when the customer entered their payment information on your website. And since tokens are time limited, if the token was generated less than 20 minutes ago and it equals the token that we received from your service when you submitted it via our API, then we kind of essentially unpack the credit card and store it in our secure credit card vault, which is what is attempted to be visualized here. So I wanted to show you a couple of examples of Recurly.js, specifically examples with source code. But before I do that, I wanted to bring up a few additional features of Recurly.js in addition to that tokenization of payment information. Since Recurly JavaScript is a kind of front-end JavaScript library for e-commerce checkout flow, it allows you to do pricing previews, including taxes and discounts. So if you have customers who are supplying you with a coupon code that gives a certain dollar amount off or a certain percentage off, Recurly will help display that to the end customer along with any tax information if applicable. Recurly.js also does some basic credit card validation. It will make sure that the credit card information that's being submitted for tokenization is valid via the LUN algorithm. It will also return things like if the expiration date is valid, and it can also be used to detect card types. So if you only accept certain credit card brands, then you could detect those up front and display an error message to the customer. Recurly.js is also used for different payment methods. So if you need to tokenize PayPal information, or if you need to tokenize ACH information, and ACH is a way of saying pay with bank account or pay with checking account. If you need to tokenize that type of information, then Recurly.js can be used with that as well. Here are those examples, two different types of examples. One is more general and has more applicability to people who are using different programming languages, and that is the Recurly.js examples repository on GitHub. The example on the right is something that we developed called KaleCrate. It's a demo site, a subscription Kale service. This one uses Ruby. So if you're a Ruby programmer, Recurly we're big Ruby fans, so we decided to create this example site in Ruby. But it shows you the advanced functionality of Recurly.js, things like pricing previews, taxes, coupons, etc. So we'll go ahead and take a look at both of these example repositories and help you navigate those. This is also a good time to share with you the link for the JavaScript library. If you go to js.recurly.com and click on documentation, you'll see a nicely developed website with code examples as well as overview about how Recurly.js works. We're going to go down to the examples section and we'll take a look at this GitHub repository for the Recurly.js examples. This is something that you could clone locally and run locally, and depending on the language that you're interested in, you'll just navigate to the appropriate section. You can see there we've developed examples in 4 different languages and using 4 different web development frameworks, so Ruby and Sinatra, Node.js and Express, Python and Flask, and PHP and Slim. A note about the PHP example, you'll need to run that in conjunction with a web server like Nginx or Apache to actually host the files, whereas these first 3 examples have that web server functionality built in. The other example, and you can actually see we have a number of different sites here, is a little bit more robust. You can see I can have a page that shows you how I would accept signups for a number of different things. You can see it has the PayPal as well as the bank account information, different add-on items. I can choose my plan. I can enter a coupon code. So this is a very robust example that should show you just about every different kind of checkout scenario that's available through the Recurly.js library. And the source code for that is also available on GitHub. this app is designed to be self-contained and deployable to Heroku. So you could actually copy this, clone this, and follow these steps to actually run this on Heroku, so you could play around with it. Again, this is a Ruby-focused example, but a lot of the front-end JavaScript stuff is applicable to any programming language used on the back end. Great. So if you capture signups using the Recurly JavaScript library in the way that I've shown and the way that the examples show, you may be questioning, well, how do I check on a customer status a month later or a year later or at any point? And the way that you would do that is through querying the Recurly API. So as I mentioned earlier, the Recurly API is a RESTful Web Services API. It returns XML. We have a number of pre-built client libraries, Ruby, PHP, Python, and C#. So you could, when a user logs into your website, query the Recurly API and ask us, hey, is this account even active? And we'll say essentially yes or no. We'll return a state for that particular account. And if the state is inactive, or if we say no, then you will essentially prompt the user to reactivate their account by supplying you with new billing information and designating which products or services they're interested in. If the account is active, then you may want to query another level down and say, well, does this account have any active subscriptions? And if it doesn't, maybe the customer has never had any subscriptions, or maybe their subscriptions have expired and are no longer active, then you can prompt the user to reselect the product or services they're interested in. If the customer does have an active subscription, you can query yet another level down and say, well, does this subscription have any past due invoices associated with it? And if it does, that means essentially that the customer has an outstanding balance, they owe you money, and you may want to alert the user to this fact. You may do that through kind of posting a banner when the customer logs in. You may restrict access to certain features. You may restrict access to your product entirely. And of course, if the customer does not have any past due invoices, if they've kind of shored up with you and they're on the normal billing cycle, then at that point you could essentially grant them full access to your website or full access to the product or services that you offer. The last step of this process is storing some of this information in a database local to your website application. And you'll want to do this for speed and simplicity reasons because especially if you sell yearly subscriptions, once the customer signs up, they're kind of good for the entirety of the following year. Of course, there are circumstances where maybe the customer cancels or something could happen in between, and we'll talk about how the webhooks can notify you of those events. But generally, you kind of want to store some of this information in your own database, query that when the user logs into your website, and get updates on that information, essentially get updates on any changes to the status quo through what Recurly calls webhooks or push notifications. So the idea here is that because Recurly is doing a lot of stuff in the background, managing subscription renewals on a monthly or yearly basis, a lot of things are happening without you actively making an API call to tell Recurly to do something. And of course, that's part of the benefit, is allowing Recurly to manage that for you. So of course, you need to be notified when things happen in Recurly, when accounts are created, when subscriptions are created, when payments fail, when invoices become past due. There are a whole host of different billing events that Recurly will notify you of via these webhooks. So the webhooks are generated regardless of how the actual billing event takes place. So the blue block up there represents, that's me creating an account via the API. That's going to result in the same kind of webhook that would occur if someone signed up on their own through a hosted payment pages. That's that middle block there. Or if one of my customer service agents or customer service agent working on behalf of your company were to create an account, that would also create an account in the Recurly web application itself. That would also generate this new account webhook or push notification. So I've enabled webhooks in this webinar, and throughout the webinar, the actions that we've been taking have resulted in some webhooks. So if I refresh my page here, we'll see that as I signed up earlier And as I updated my billing information, these are the webhooks that were generated as part of that process. Here's the new subscription notification that was created when we signed up via the hosted payment pages. Here's the invoice notification, etc. I'm using a tool called RequestBin. I highly recommend it for testing out your webhooks. It's a free tool, very easy to set up and use. And if you were to use RequestBin, you can simply copy the URL that's generated into the webhooks configuration dialog in the Recurly application. So I've already done that, but I'll show you how you would go about doing that. Simply go to this developers node, hit webhooks, then hit configure, and copy and paste that webhook URL into this configuration, and then any webhooks that Recurly generates will automatically be sent to this endpoint. While we're in this developers kind of node, I'll also point out the API credentials section. So this is where your private API key as well as your public key are stored. So when you're using the Recurly JavaScript library, you need to take note of this public key. And when you're using the Recurly API, the RESTful Web Services API, you'll need to take note of this private API key. Your private API key should be kept a secret, so that's why there's an ability to regenerate this key. And after this webinar, I'll go ahead and do that for both of these API keys. Finally, I wanted to leave you with a couple of resources and places to turn to if you run into questions or have problems when you are trying to integrate Recurly. Docs.recurly.com is our main kind of reference documentation site. So if you were interested in the hosted payment pages or the hosted account management pages, or if you just had general questions about Recurly and subscription billing and payment processing, then docs.recurly.com would certainly be a good point to start. The Recurly.js examples site is what we looked at earlier, that repository of the 4 different examples of using Recurly.js with Ruby, Node, PHP, and Python. The Recurly.js documentation itself is at js.recurly.com. We just launched a new developer portal, dev.recurly.com, and let's actually go ahead and take a look at that. For those of you who will be developing against the Recurly API, this is going to become a very valuable resource for you. And it's broken down into a number of sections, an overview page. If you're writing your own calls against the API, not relying on one of our pre-built client libraries, you'll want to make sure to review this section, especially the authentication section. This website also contains information about the webhooks. It also includes a link to the Recurly.js documentation. And this is where you'll want to start if you are going to be developing in any of these languages. We have just recently relaunched iOS and Android SDK, so if you're a mobile developer, you'll want to go ahead and click the appropriate link here to get as much information on those as possible. And then the rest of the page is devoted to the different objects that are available via the Recurly API. So if I wanted to get information about a particular account, this is the API call that I would use to do that. What's great about this new website is it shows you how to make the call using the simply get and the URL, but it also has examples in the different programming languages that we support. It also gives you a sample result or response format. So very helpful to start realizing which objects are available in Recurly, which fields are available, and how you interact with those different objects and fields. If you notice something that you'd like to be changed, you can actually suggest an edit. So this is another great feature of this new developer portal. If something's unclear to you, or you discover something as you're testing and want to suggest an edit, you can go ahead and do that. So I'd recommend for those of you who will be using their API extensively to spend some time navigating this site, figuring out the layout, just taking advantage of the different examples and response formats to really become comfortable working with the Recurly API. All right, let's go ahead and look at the last few items here. If you found this webinar useful, we will be posting a recording of it on info.recurly.com. Recurly hosts a number of different webinars, from product demos. A lot of times we'll do them with partners. So info.recurly.com is a great place to check from time to time to see if there are any past or future webinars that might be of interest to you. For those of you who have already signed up for a Recurly sandbox site, which you can do directly on Recurly.com, you'll notice that once you log into the application itself, there's in-application live chat, so you can use that to talk one-on-one in real time with one of our support agents. If that's unavailable, or you have a more detailed question, you can send that to support@Recurly.com. For those of you who are developers and want to speak directly to one of Recurly's developers, you can use our IRC channel. It's Recurly on Freenode. We tend to have 2 or 3 developers in there from time to time, and they'll do their best to answer any really pointed technical questions you might have. Finally, if you are working on a project that's in the beginning stages, you're evaluating Recurly, you have questions about best practices or which integration method would be best for you and your organization. As a sales engineer, that is part of what I do on a daily basis, so please send those queries directly to me. There's my email address, very straightforward, just charlie@recurly.com. And I look forward to hearing from folks who are evaluating Recurly and want to get information about where Recurly fits in the payment stack, our competitive advantages, etc. Finally, I wanted to thank you for spending half an hour with me this morning going over the integration options available to you as a potential Recurly customer. Again, there's my email address. More information about Recurly itself can be found on Recurly.com. Certainly follow us on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, whichever social media network you're on the most. And I think now we'll go ahead and visit some questions. Any questions coming in last minute here? Otherwise, we'll just address the few that are have already been submitted. I'll give you guys a second to do that. All right, so let me close this. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and close that PowerPoint. And someone is asking a question about third-party integrators. So Recurly does have a list of third-party integrators. We work with kind of data analysis companies from time to time, different providers that provide different services. Recurly also has built-in integrations with MailChimp, which is an email marketing tool, Salesforce, which is obviously the world's most popular CRM. And then we do have these additional integrations that are available to you, kind of plug and play. So they're mostly around kind of customer analytics and data analytics, but we support a number of different integrators there. And if you yourself are interested in developing an integration between your solution and Recurly, please contact us using this email link. All right, one other question here about integrations to content management systems like WordPress and Drupal. So Recurly doesn't officially support any integrations to platforms like that. Certainly there are third-party plugins that folks use. I know one especially for Drupal. And there's actually one for Joomla, which is a newer content management system that is gaining some popularity. It's called Simple Renew. And it's actually developed by a Recurly customer. They're called OS Training. They do all sorts of coding and web development training. But again, that extension is called Simple Renew. It's for Joomla and allows you to essentially run a membership-based site, a subscription-based site through your Joomla CMS. So a very nice tool, free to use. Just simply install the extension into your Joomla site. and it would allow you to build a membership database in conjunction with subscription billing in Recurly. Great. I'm going to do one last check of the questions and see if there's any last minute coming in. Doesn't appear to be the case. So of course, if you think of questions after the fact, please either send them to me or you can direct them to support@recurly.com. But thanks again for joining us. We hope you found this educational, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.